Let me ask you, I have a very personal question and something that I haven't shared before that I'd like to ask you about buying things.
Oh boy. Wow.
No, I just think that this is something that nobody talks about. And I always like to like, you're so good at finding stuff that, you can pick up and you're a very open person, which I've always appreciated about your podcast and like, just like how you transparent about feelings and emotions and a lot of things that I think a lot of men could use to look up to, in
Okay.
terms of
Oh God.
who you are.
Is this question gonna be a fucking hydrogen bomb?
This is a tough one. No. So here's a problem that I've had. Just being completely honest.
Yeah.
There was back when I was in my 20s and early 30s. Dig was doing quite well, which was my startup. For those of you who don't know, it was an early social news website that was killing it. We had 38 million people a month that were visiting the site.
Huge.
Back then, it was one of the top sites on the internet. It was crazy. It started to go sideways and it started to go down and like not, like we were losing to Reddit. Reddit was starting to kick our ass in some certain ways. And, we had dominated them for many years. And then all of a sudden that was not the case. And we were kind of reeling a little bit. I had sold a tiny bit of my stock, enough to be able to afford an apartment in actually buy and put a down payment on an apartment. And that's how I got my Page Street place in SF. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I need to buy myself something to like, it was a search to feel better. Right.
Yep.
And so I went out and I actually bought, and this is going to sound super douchey, but I'm okay to say this today. Like I bought a Porsche. I bought a Porsche 911 back in the day. And looking back on that, I realized I was just in a really difficult, sad state. It was hard for me, to watch this baby of mine. And I didn't know how to course correct it, right? I was just so immature in a bunch of different ways, but I was buying for the sake of trying to fill a gap, right? Don't get me wrong. Like I still think vintage Porsches and old Porsches and Porsches in general, they're just beautiful cars. Like I think they're great. I don't have a 911 today, but I will say that I've noticed the same thing. It's
Kevin is not anti-Porsche in his group text messaging.
Please don't cancel me, Porsche. I would love to be sponsored. If you want to sponsor me, I'm happy to drive a 911. So that said, here's the crazy thing. I went and ran Hodinkee, the luxury watch brand company. I was CEO there for a few years and loved my experience there because we were covering mechanical, like a dying art. Like it was like mechanical timepieces, and it was very beautiful in its purest form. In its purest form, you talk to an artisan that is a single independent watchmaker that takes a year and a half to build something from scratch and sells 10 a year. That's beautiful. Like that's those days are going away. In its douchey form, you're talking to Lambo drivers that just want to have a flex that they can hold a watch on their wrist that says, I have $5 million on my wrist, right? Like that's a real thing. And so I met with a lot as CEO of this company. This is like it still is the largest watch brand editorial site in the world. And you would meet all these collectors and they would come up to you and they come in all different shapes and sizes. And it was clear to me that some of these dudes, like bless them, they were trying to fill that same thing that I was trying to fill, where you go out and you spend money on something to make yourself feel in a group, feel connected, to feel connection. Because you come out and you say, these are other collectors like me. Like and it's tough. And I'm not anti-watch. I remember wearing an Apple Watch today, but I still have a few timepieces that are really meaningful to me, including one that my dad left me when he passed away. And I still love that whole thing. But how do you approach this as somebody? Have you ever spent your money on things, and then how do you approach it with like? Have you ever done that? And then also, how do you approach that with significant others? Like, I've had this conversation with my wife about like, hey, we don't have to wear the flashy stuff. It's okay to wear, I told her the other night, like one of my favorite times to hang out with you is when it's jeans and t-shirts, like version of you at a bar. Like, I love that. Like having a beer, totally. Like we don't have to be fancy LA. Like, I don't want that. Like, where do you stand on all this stuff?
So I think, and you've probably observed this in me,
You're so good at this. This is why I'm trying to pick your brain. You don't do any flashy shit.
Well, I'm good, but there is a downside. There is a trade-off. And I have not figured out how to contend with this. And I'll actually mention also a book that has come up several times in the last week from multiple people I respect. And remember, Rick Rubin, the music producer, said to me, when that happens to him, he feels like it's a signal from the universe that he needs to take a look at something. And so I kind of feel like that right now with this book, which I'll come to in a second. I have had very few instances of buying expensive things for myself. And you've seen this.
Oh, I know.
I don't think I'm stingy in all things. For instance, I will go to, if I think the experience is going to leave an indelible mark in my mind, I will go to a place like Alinea in Chicago and have a meal. And I did that. And I'm really glad I did. And it's very expensive, right? I mean, I would consider it very expensive. It's like $1,500, $2,000 for a meal. And that on some level would make the 15-year-old version of me go into a seizure, right? I did not grow up with a lot of money and grew up in a household where scarcity of money was an issue.
Oh my God. My dad would yell at my mom for spending too much money on stuff because we literally bounce checks. Like, I remember that being a conversation, like the account is overdrawn. Like,
yeah. It was a source of stress. And so I decided pretty early on as a kid, okay, I do not want this type of stress in my life. That means I need to figure out how to make money. And that, in a way, was the spark behind my entrepreneurial experiments. It's like, okay, this type of stress that I have been immersed in and exposed to, and I don't think it traumatized me. I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't want to remove the power of that word trauma by applying it to something like this. And I think it kind of disgusts me how overused the word trauma is. That's a separate thing. But it affected me. It definitely imprinted something on me. And as a result, I have spent relatively little money celebrating anything. Right, the fact that I spent, like, these Japanese saddles, right? I bought them at auction from I can't remember, it was Christie's or Sotheby's, and I think it was $5,000 a piece, right? And to allow myself to do that, the hurdle was, not only do I have to finish and publish a book that is 500 plus pages, I think it was maybe 700 pages, which was cut down from probably 1,500 pages.
Was this in your head, or is this something you wrote down? Like, this is a hurdle that you had to, like, you're like, I'm going to...
It was in my head. But I said, if I publish this book and it is #1 New York Times, I will allow myself, as a reward, to buy these saddles that cost $5,000 each. And if I don't, I'm not allowed to do this. So on some level, I respect that. And it's very strict, high standards. And on some level, all of those things are good. But what I will say is, when I meet or spend time with friends of mine who have achieved some degree of success, and it's not always millions of dollars, right? They've just figured out a job and a skill where they've developed a career and they're stable, and they fix a lot of problems for themselves, and they add a lot of joy for themselves and their families by spending money. The dark side of what I'm describing is that I don't think I've developed that very well. And so I have more money than I know what to do with. And I think I put it, I don't want to sound like a prick. That doesn't mean that I'm just like doing backstroke through a pool full of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. That's not what I'm saying. I think I am a very, very, hopefully this doesn't sound pompous. I think I am a very, very good capital allocator and steward of money. I think I use what I have to very high leverage means and objectives through funding the science and the journalism fellowship with Michael Pollan and so on. Like, but here's what I'll say, Kevin, is there's a dark side to it in that I don't use money to fix problems that I should fix.
Like what? Give me an example.
I'll give an example, which would be, there are little things. I'll give you a perfect example. So there is an article. It's not really an article. It's more an adaptation of John Stuart Mill's Ideas on Free Speech, which is an illustrated edition. It's called All Minus One. You can find it on Amazon. You can also get it for free. I think it's at heterodoxacademy.org/mill. And this came about through a conversation with Jonathan Haidt, who's fascinating thinker and professor and researcher who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind and many other books. So this is, let's see, on Kindle, it's, I think, 78 pages. And I agonized over when I was going to find time to print this and put it together in a hard copy so that I could mark it up. Because I didn't want to wait for the paperback. This is stupid. I have employees. I could send this to someone and just be like, hey, figure this out. Whatever makes it readable, go. Right? It would take in 30 seconds. But there's part of me, for whatever reason, that gets stuck on doing it myself and doesn't even consider that. It doesn't enter my head as an option. And there are many other examples of this, right? I've been to friends' houses where they love, let's not name names, but well, because you'll probably get it. But like, I have a friend who really loves Topo Chico, and you go to his house, and he always has a refrigerated drawer full of Topo Chico. Yeah, it's never empty. He never runs out.
It's extra sparkly. It's good.
It is. Yeah, it'll definitely take all the enamel off your teeth. It's delicious. Yeah. And even though all the hipster Austinites have boycotted it because it's owned by the evil empire of Coca-Cola now, so they're drinking Richard's rainwater and others, which are fine sparkling water. But I just find the outrage pretty hilarious. But the point is, like, he has a team. He pays people to help him and his family with their lives in various ways so that he can focus on things he's really good at, which does not include figuring out at the last minute, oh shit, I'm out of Topo Chico. How am I going to make it in time to the grocery store to buy this and chew up 45 minutes of my time? I don't have many of those systems in place. And it's not because I am consciously deciding I need to save money. It's like the option doesn't even appear on my mental UI to choose. So this is something I'm trying to figure out, which leads to the book, which has been recommended a number of times now, which is called Die with Zero. I've not read it.
I've heard about this, actually.
So full disclosure, I've not read it.
Chris Hutchins sent this to me.
Oh, no shit. Okay. So Bill Perkins is the author, and I should know better than to recommend something before I've read it. So I just want to make it super clear. I have not read this, but the book is Die with Zero, Getting All You Can from Your Money and Your Life. And it's written by Bill Perkins, who's a famous energy trader / investor. And the Wall Street Journal bestseller, I'll just read a little bit of the description, which is very seductive to me because it's written by someone who has also been an operator. If this book were written by just someone who's waxing poetic without any real bona fides, I would be skeptical. But this is someone who's actually been a real operator in the trenches. So the description is a common sense guide to living rich instead of dying rich. Imagine if, by the time you died, you did everything you were told to. You worked hard, saved your money, and looked forward to financial freedom when you retired. The only thing you wasted along the way was ... your life. Die with Zero presents a startling new and provocative philosophy as well as practical guide on how to get the most out of your money and the most out of your life. It's intended for those who place lifelong memorable experiences far ahead of simply making and accumulating money for one's so-called golden years. And it goes on.
Yes.
This is interesting to me.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that it provides me with some counter programming that will maybe help me to do more. And I will say, been finding some outlets where I don't have hangups. And one is spending money on art or supporting artists. So I will be doing, moving forward, quite a few experiments with artists and artwork.